David Plouffe is a guy who's been part of winning campaigns with Joe Biden specifically for years now. In 2008, he was Barack Obama's campaign manager, continued to work for Obama until his reelection and inauguration in 2013. And we're told he worked with President Obama on the speech he will deliver tonight, which has to be one of the President Obama's most anticipated ever. And joining me now is David Plouffe. I want to start with President Obama's perception of the rhetorical boundaries are as an ex-president talking about a sitting president, because we all know Barack Obama is an institutionalist, that certain kinds of norms of democratic civility matter to him a tremendous amount. How is he thinking about that? How do you assess that in this particular perilous moment?
Right. Well, Chris, and let's not overstate my involvement in this speech. You know, it's like the Eagles Road. You can check it anytime you want, but you can never leave. So I've certainly spoken to him about the speech and seen it and offered whatever meaningless thoughts I have. But I think what he's going to say tonight is he's going to make a powerful case on behalf of Joe Biden, a powerful case against Donald Trump. And I'll get back to your question in a minute, and a powerful case in support of our democracy and how threatened it is. And so I think if you look at his speech in Philadelphia in 2016, so 2 successive conventions in a row with speeches in Philadelphia, we just saw some clips from that. Very good speech, great case for Hillary Clinton. But you see Michelle Obama's speech, Bernie Sanders' speech, Barack Obama's speech tonight. There's a sense of urgency and ferocity and stakes raising that has to happen here. So I think his view, Michelle Obama's view on Monday, is the difference between 4 years of Donald Trump, we're barely going to survive it. We may not survive 8 years. And so, you know, you have to make a case to people about how important this election is. And I think just as Michelle Obama did on Monday, Barack Obama will tonight, I assume Joe Biden will tomorrow night, also make a case of the individual responsibility of everybody who doesn't want to see Donald Trump elected. You have to vote. You've got to ask for your absentee ballot today. You've got to talk to everybody you know in your life about it. Like, we got to be all over this. And so that's where I think the boundaries have shifted. I think the threat to the entire enterprise, for democracy, to the world, is so severe that Barack Obama and I think others are willing to go places maybe they wouldn't have gone in the past.
How do you balance that? I mean, one of the things I think in a bizarre, perverse way that has aided Donald Trump is that there are so many targets. There are so many things about him to criticize that sometimes focusing could be difficult. I think it's been a problem. I think the pandemic in some ways has been clarifying in that regard. I mean, here there's 176,000 Americans who've died. We lost 1,400 more or something like that today. How do you balance the sort of huge epic stakes to democracy and the more straightforward, just substantive competency failures that we've seen, particularly over the last few months?
Well, Chris, I do think the pandemic is clarifying. So from a health standpoint, or what's happening here in America compared to pretty much every other country in the world, we are the worst country in the world. Economically, Bill Clinton spoke about this powerfully last night, much bigger economic impacts here. And that is linked to his lack of character, his lack of fitness for the job, his lack of seriousness. And it is very much married to the case you want to make for Joe Biden, which is our economy won't recover. We won't be able to tackle things like climate change with the ferocity we need to until we get out from under COVID-19. And you can't trust Donald Trump to do that. The democracy part of this is important. Yeah. And I think Barack Obama is going to talk about this tonight. Michelle Obama did. This is where I think sometimes we can become numb to it. So Democrats have finally woken up, in my view, and taking the threat of the post office attacks seriously, but they got to stay on it. But we shrug our shoulders sometimes and say, there he goes again. It's another political tactic. But we've never had anybody who will do anything, say anything, in the most powerful office the world has ever known to illegally hold on to power. And I think that's motivational not just to Democrats. I think it is motivational to swing voters as well, who actually kind of like this democracy they're living in. But that's where I think it can get challenging, because all these things can kind of run together, and it's tough to separate what is a threat to the entire enterprise and a hit to the main engine and just Trump popping off.
David Plouffe, we started this conversation earlier this week, but my question for you is two-part. One, How do you sustain what the Democrats have achieved this week for the first time in a long time, which is to block Trump out of the headlines? I mean, they've had a direct line to a very large audience of Americans. This will be the third night in a row. But Donald Trump does have the ability, because of the chaos he sows, as you said, because of the extraordinary assault on democracy and on the post office, of sort of blocking out the sun. How do they hang on to the spotlight that they've grabbed this week and continue to prosecute their case?
Well, Nicole, it's a great question. I'm more interested in their convention next week than ours. I've loved ours. I think I like these next 2 nights because Trump's behind. Yeah. So how does he use these 4 hours essentially to begin to add some support back? But if it is really just a series of grievances and insults and white power hours, he can have all the time he wants, because I don't think that's going to help him at all. I think Democrats really were challenged by that in 2016. So if he were making speeches, conducting interviews, sending out social media posts that would gain back some of what he's lost with senior voters, with suburban voters, with college-educated males, I'd worry, because he does have a unique ability to dominate the oxygen. But right now, he's just fouling the oxygen. So I'm a little less concerned about it. I also think he's president now. Yeah. And I think there's more than enough people who've decided, I don't want to hire this guy. And that's why I think Barack Obama's speech tonight, Kamala Harris's speech tonight, Joe Biden, and the rest of the campaign, with the debates being the far most important nights of the rest of the campaign. Wow. If Joe Biden can make people feel a little bit better about, yes, this is a guy who's up to it. He's got good values. He's got good characters. I like what he's saying about what he's going to do in the next 4, not what he did in the last 40. That's going to be more important, I think, than the arguments we make against Trump. But that is a challenge. But right now, he's not helping himself. I think what he's done this week has been a political malpractice. He should have been in the White House holding meetings with the coronavirus task force, with economics, instead of running around the country like some washed up vaudeville performer.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.